What I want to talk about today is, because I believe so passionately that the gospel matters in the work that we do, what I want to talk about is what happens when we forget that, and what happens to organizations that originally have the same fervor and belief, and yet today are doing something dramatically different. I want to start by telling a story of two different organizations. First organization was founded by Dr. Calvin Clark, Presbyterian minister traveling in China, had a missionary friend who said, "Do you believe that Americans are doing all they can to help?" And his response was no. He wanted to wake up the world at that moment, and he did it by creating the child sponsorship model. Many people credit him as creating the child sponsorship model. And this organization, founded in 1938, today is serving over 2 million sponsorships right now throughout their work. Massive organization, one of the 58 largest charities in America according to Forbes. Another organization, so you got that, so Presbyterian minister, China, question, 1938, child sponsorship, massive scale. Another organization founded by Everett Swanson, Presbyterian minister, not in China but in Korea. Founded after being asked this question: "You've seen the tremendous needs and unparalleled opportunities of this land. What do you intend to do about it?" His response is, "My faith compels me to do something." And so he founded an organization in 1952 that today is serving over 1.4 million children through child sponsorships. Another massive organization. Do you hear those two stories? They sound almost interchangeably. You've got a Presbyterian minister, you've got them going on a trip, you've got them seeing needs, you've got their hearts touched, you've got their eyes open, they come back, they create an organization around the same time, use child sponsorship as the primary vehicle, doing great work, massive scale, and yet today, where are they? Interesting, because the stories that sound so similar in their founding do not match where they are today. So the two organizations are, anyone know the first one? Founded by Dr. Clark. Save the Children. Its initial name was China Christian Fund. Then it became Christian Children's Fund. Sally Struthers in the 80s was on every single television in America, surrounded by a group of people saying, "For the price of a cup of coffee, you can save a life." Today, they changed their name to Child Fund International. Everett Swanson founded the organization. You guys know anything about that one? Shady organization, I hear some shady employees, but Compassion International is what he founded. But today, when Christian Children's Fund changed their name to Child Fund in 2009, this was after there were growing alerts from watchdog organizations that said this organization is intentionally misleading donors by having the word Christian in its name. Christianity Today did an article on them, and their summary was, "This organization has nothing to do with Christianity," and that was actually quoting one of their board members. So a board member says, "Christian Children's Fund, this organization has nothing to do with Christianity." President Ann Goddard in 2009 said this when they changed their name. She said, "An organization changes slowly, and then all of a sudden you realize the changes have happened so much that you need to step back and see if the name you're putting out there really reflects who you are." And when she took a step back, she said having Christian in the name does not reflect who we are. As the board member said, this organization has nothing to do with Christianity. Compare them to Compassion. Compassion International. When we started asking people for organizations that had remained mission true, Compassion kept coming up as an organization that had grown, an organization that had scaled, and an organization that had truly stayed on mission. And there was an interesting time where Wes Stafford told a story about a group of consultants that came in and did an analysis of Compassion International. And they said, "Compassion, you guys have the best name in the business. Who wouldn't want to be part of an organization called Compassion International?" But the consultant said, "But this Jesus stuff, I don't know, that's more polarizing. Not everyone." They said, "Downplay the Jesus stuff and then see what will happen." And Wes's response was this. He said, "We thought for 10 seconds. And said, no, not now, not ever." I think that's a pretty fantastic response. And it was that mission clarity that said, growth is good, but staying true to our mission is better. They said, that is what we're going to do, and I think we see an incredible example of actually not blessing that organization and blessing the decisions that they made. Can I give one other contrasting set of stories? Because I just found this so interesting. Stories that sound so similar, but another one. J. Howard Pugh made his money in oil. He was founded Sun Oil, later became Sunoco. He was a passionate follower of Jesus. He was into social justice before it was cool. His cause was abolition, and he generously funded all kinds of organizations. He funded Grove City, he funded Fuller, he funded Moody, he co-founded Gordon Conwell Seminary and set it up so that permanently a third of the funding was always going to come from him and his estate. He said a third from the board, a third from me, and a third from tuition. That would be a pretty good model. He had a partnership with evangelist Billy Graham. In his partnership with Billy Graham came to him in his office and pitched him on the idea of a journal, and together they launched Christianity Today. That was Pew providing the financing for that, partnering with Billy Graham. Incredible. So that was J. Howard Pugh. Next, Henry Kroll. Everybody know Henry Kroll? What did he found?
Kroll Trust.
Kroll Trust. And where did the money from Kroll Trust come from?
Is it Quaker Oats?
Quaker Oats, yeah. So he turned around this bankrupt mill, very creative marketer, ended up taking all of the trains and turning them into moving billboards that he had. His passion also was the gospel. He was passionate also about social justice. The red light district in Chicago was his cause, and they worked to eradicate Chicago of the red light district. He gave away very generously. A friend asked him once how much had he given away, and he said, I don't even let myself in on that. Turns out in records he gave at least 70% of his income away. His partnership wasn't with Billy Graham, his partnership was with Dwight Moody, and together they launched all sorts of initiatives. So again, you've got these titans of industry, one oil, one oats. You've got passionate about social justice, one abolition, one red light district. You've got both extraordinarily generous. You got both of them with key partnerships. And where are they today? Today, the Pew Charitable Trust, if you look at their documents, recently they have funded Planned Parenthood and the universities that J. Howard Pugh absolutely was so turned off by. He created Gordon Conwell as an alternative to what he was seeing that was happening. And yet today, those are the recipients of his massive funding. And when asked about this, there are many people that have asked, why is this a case of mission drift? And the president, Rebecca Rummel, said this in defending the decisions that they had made. She said, Howard was a man of strong convictions, and his successors on our board are following in his tradition by having strong convictions. Did you get that? Did you get that? He had strong opinions, so we're carrying on his legacy because we have strong opinions too. Now, what those strong opinions are on apparently are irrelevant to the organization. If he were alive today, according to everything that we see in his writing and while he was alive, he would be appalled, absolutely appalled at what his funds were doing today. Contrast that to Henry Kroll. Today, the Kroll Trust is one of the most beautiful examples of an organization that has remained mission true, where the priorities today are fully in line with the original intent. And I can say that with confidence because they fund Hope International. So, it's obvious. But more than that, every year they get together, every board meeting, and all of the board members together read the words in his own words about what his passions are, and they make every allocation decision after just listening to what he wanted to do with the funds that God had blessed him with. So we can say they have remained mission true because they're still reading his words and they're still saying, what would he do if he were here? They are honoring his legacy in a beautiful way. Now the question again for all of us, I love the variety of organizations. Every single one of you has the ability to influence the organizations in which you're working. And the question is, what are the small decisions that you can make to help your organizations and your school and all of the good things that you're involved with? What can you do to help remain mission true? As we looked at this, spent 2 years looking at this, over 200 different individual interviews, And what we found is this, is there is no one issue. You cannot just focus on this one issue and then everything goes away, but rather it's a story of benign neglect that is seen in a million small decisions that seem inconsequential at the time in which they're made. And so I hope we can wake up to realize that we have the ability to make decisions that are either going to slowly, when compounded by time, draw us off mission, or we're going to have the ability to even more firmly put a stake in the ground and say, our Christian identity matters, and it's worth protecting. So how do we do that? Here are 7 suggestions. And Beth, tell me when I need to stop. First thing that we found in all organizations is that you need to start from a position that you believe that drift is the natural course all organizations move. You have to believe that drift is an issue and you're not going to take any steps to prevent it. The founders of Harvard University had this as their one of their founding documents, one of their founding mission statements. They said to be plainly instructed and consider well that the main end of your life and studies is to know God and Jesus Christ. Now, they're not doing that today. They're doing good work, but they're not doing what they were created to do. But I don't fault them for mission drift quite as much as another organization, another higher education that saw what was happening at Harvard and said, we got to protect against that. So they went a little down south to warmer weather in Connecticut, and said, let's plant something. And Veritas wasn't good enough. Truth wasn't good enough. We want Luke's at Veritas. We want light and truth. We want the truth to be illuminated by the light of Christ. And they founded Yale. They founded Yale because they saw drift happening at Harvard, and yet they weren't able to protect against it. And Yale followed that same well-worn path. First thing that we got to do is believe drift happens. It's interesting also, Steve Muller, the former president of Johns Hopkins, when looking at Harvard's 350th year anniversary celebration, going back, his conclusion was this university has become godless. Second thing we need to do is we need to differentiate the mission from the means. We're not at all arguing to say that change is not necessary, change is not important, but the question is what's the change for? And mission-true organizations know what their immutable aspects are. They have mission clarity about here's what's better. We'd rather fold up than compromise on this. And then everything else is held lightly. Young Life, when they were founded, one of their primary outreach strategies was barbershop quartets. Now, with glee, maybe they're coming back. Barbershop quartets might not be the most effective strategy for an organization trying to reach youth. It might, but it might not. They recognize that barbershop quartets is not our mission. That is a means with which, and so if something else comes up that's a better way, if the club model is a better way, if this sort of mentoring relationship is a better way to accomplish our mission, then let's drop barbershop quartets. That's not a hill that's worth dying on. Interestingly, even the name of an organization, I believe, should be held lightly. Campus Crusade for Christ found that 20% of individuals would not engage in a conversation after hearing their name, Campus Crusade for Christ. And they said, our name is hindering our mission, so let's change the name. And so they changed it to Crew. Motley Crue didn't appreciate that, but Crew was their new name. And yet I believe that they knew this is not who we are. It's not our name. We're not tied to our name. We are tied to our mission. Third thing, hiring. There's an incredible story about the slow issue of hiring from my favorite characters on Saturday morning television, Bob and Larry. Bob and Larry from VeggieTales. Anyone else enjoy little VeggieTales on the side? Don't feel bad about that. But these guys, VeggieTales. So VeggieTales, who knows about VeggieTales? Yeah, what's the story with VeggieTales? What are they?
They're Bible stories.
Yeah, they're Bible stories.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're all vegetables that tell us stories.
Yeah. And they're highly entertaining, right? I mean,
I sing all the songs. I know all the songs.
I can't remember the theme song. We got a show for you. That's it. So amazing. Like, you don't get an organization that has more mission clarity than VeggieTales, do you? Like, I mean, they exist to bring Bible stories to life. Phil Fisher, in his book, Me, Myself, and Bob, told a story where he had a company meeting as they were in the height of their growth, an incredible time of growth, and he stands up and he says, I'm a Christian, and I believe the Bible exclusively holds the truth about our standing before God and the path to restore our relationships with Him. I want to share that truth with our culture. That is, at the end of the day, what Big Idea is all about. Now, if this was an organization that was about all of that, you'd think there'd be a little bit of clapping or standing up, but he says there was an awkward silence until the president, with all of the credentials of a great leader, corporate experience, success, he stands up after being 2 years in the role of president and says, if that's what this is all about, I need to opt out. Gulp. The person that you've been empowering to live out the mission says, if that's what this organization is for, I need to opt out? How did that happen? And the reality is, too often, the passions of the first generation become the preferences of the second generation and become irrelevant to the third generation. And sometimes you skip the middle step. The passions of the first generation become irrelevant to the next generation. Part of the reason for that is because we are so intrigued by our experience and by our credentials that we somehow get blind to asking core questions of mission fit. We somehow say, this is the perfect person, without taking any time to realize, is there full heart alignment on what the organization actually exists to do? 4, issue, follow the money. Money matters. When Andrew Carnegie, who made his money in steel, was nearing the end of his life, he had a passion for college. He had a passion for teachers, but he said they are the most overworked and underappreciated vocation in the world. Anyone get an amen for that?
My boss is sitting there.
But it's true, incredible. And he said that's not okay. So he created a pension fund, put $10 million in it, and he put it for aged university and technical school teachers. And so we said, out of this fund, which is a lot of money, he's going to provide a pension so that when individuals have served well, that they have money to carry them. And he also said that sectarian and state institutions would be barred from receiving his funds. Now that word sectarian was interesting because the way that that was implemented was any organization that had any form of an official partnership with any Christian root or any Christian heritage was barred. And I could just imagine some of the conversations that happened at Dartmouth, that happened at Oberlin, that happened at so many schools with beautiful histories. Now listen, this isn't going to cause us to drift, but we can get this money for our teachers. We don't need those people on our board. Let's just forget that. We'll still stay on mission. And yet it was at this moment in time, certainly with other factors, but was the most rapid secularization of higher education. Looking back at Andrew Carnegie's life, it is doubted that he had any idea that this would contribute in such a dramatic way to the secularization of higher education. 5, you get what you measure. Several years ago, we had a poster child program that was rapidly growing. And it was every time, we were in 3 countries, so we had limited options that we could talk about, but we were always talking about this program, adding 1,000 new families per month as we were growing. All of our success indicators looked good, which were budget and number of people served. Who needs other indicators? Donors only cared about those 2 numbers, and we could tell we're growing like this, and with more capital we can grow more. And after receiving a Pro Port Innovation Award from the World Bank, after going to Washington, D.C. to give an acceptance speech, the floor fell out from under us, and it was one of the most humiliating moments of my life when we literally had to start over and lost millions of dollars in the most painful leadership lesson that I've ever had to learn. I don't want that money to go to waste. That's a lot of tuition at Eastern's programs, but it was an incredible learning experience. And here's what I realized. It's easy to be intoxicated with summary growth numbers that have nothing to really tell us about the health of our organizations. We've got to find a different way of measuring and monitoring success beyond percent of program, beyond size of budget, and number of people served. Those are misleading indicators, because if those are all that you're driven by, you're going to do anything to get those numbers. And if you'll do anything to do those numbers, to get those numbers, then it is a very short path between where you are and significant mission drift. Board is a huge one. I found that most, the next number 6, board issue, I found that most of the time board recruitment goes like this. Dustin, you've been a very generous supporter of Hope. You've given really, really generously. I am so, so grateful. Would you ever have any interest in joining our board? Dustin says, yeah, that'd be great. I go back to the board meeting and I say, guys, you're not going to believe this. Dustin, he's willing to join our board. And we all say, that's amazing. And then we end up having one person that says, well, tell me, just like, are we sure there's full mission fit? Like, are we sure he's going to be like? And I said, well, he gives to Hope, so of course he is. Like, there's no question. Go back and say, Dustin, in a conversation with Dustin a little bit later, say, Dustin, so tell me about like your church life. And Dustin says, well, I go every Christmas and sometimes even on Easter. Like, and then you go back to the board and say, I don't know what to do. We can't rescind the offer. We just offered. He's one of our major donors. We can't go back on that. And yet, how many organizations then, the conversation changes once Dustin is in the room. The conversation changes because you don't go to the same places that you did before. One person has a dramatic impact. And then when the next person comes up, you can't have the conversation that says, well, let's screen for faith. And then Dustin says, hold on. That person's a good person, and they're on this foundation board. And it is a very rapid time where if the board does not realize it's not their job primarily to raise money, it is primarily their job to protect the mission of the organization. And board members that believe that get really serious about then the inflow on the board, and they don't make quick decisions, and they don't have conversations without a thorough vetting process before you even open the door of the possibility. Board matters. Last, mission drift is ultimately only an issue of our own personal drift. And if we focus on all the organizational indicators and yet forget what is happening in our own hearts, we're only sowing the seeds of drift. And I find, as Beth said, so many organizations are so busy doing good things for God that they're forgetting about what God might want to do in their own life. There is a well-worn path of people that are doing your sort of work, with your sort of drives, with your sort of abilities. There are too many stories that start out just like yours and end really, really bad. With a faith fallout, with a family that resents the work that you're doing, with absolutely fractured personal health. And I don't believe that has to happen. I don't buy it that just because you do this means those are the prices that everyone has to pay. Now, if God chooses to bring suffering into our life for His glory, that absolutely is, but I don't think we have to be so eager to get that suffering that we do everything possible to bring it on ourselves. A few years ago, my wife came to me and said, Peter, you are choosing the ministry over me, and I feel nothing. When your spouse says that she feels nothing for you, that was the biggest wake-up moment when I realized, my goodness, I was giving my wife my leftovers, and it was not a pattern that was leading to health. It was not a pattern that even was good for the organization, and it was on a pattern that was leaving resentment at home so that I could feel good about myself in doing some good work, and I believe that does not honor the Lord. So when we talk about mission drift, we know that staying mission true starts with you. It starts with our hearts. It starts with what God might be doing in our lives so that we are serving from a position of grounded faith, of grounded understanding of the big picture that this world is not ours to save. God is already doing a work. And when you believe that, you can rest when the day's done. When you believe that, you can take Sunday off. When you believe that, you can let go and you can delegate and you can empower, but it all starts from, I believe, a grounded understanding of this world, like we are simply have the privilege of participating in what God is already doing. And that changes everything when we believe that. I hope and pray that when I get to meet all of you again at some point, that you will have simple stories of powerful decisions where you made decisions in your life and in the organizations that you serve to put more anchors in the ground and say, it's worse than mission true. And I pray that God will bless you in that and that you will be a blessing to the organizations in which you serve. Thanks so much for having me.
Amen.